All right. Part 2. Okay, so in the first part, we talked about grounding and protection, and we talked about some different therapeutic resources, including therapists, shadow work journal, churches, etc. Anyway, so I also touched on the recognition of behavioral and relational patterns, as well as identifying core, unmet needs, and so these recognizing the behavioral and relational patterns. I mentioned specifically, I gave the example of romantic relationships, right? A cycle that I kept repeating and how that linked back to unmet needs that I had in childhood due to narcissistic family dynamics. But I do want to say too, right? I wish it was just this easy of saying like, here's my pattern, here's my, unmet need or core wound, and problem solved, right? I do want to emphasize that this process is circular. It's not linear, right? It's not like you find that wound and then you fixed it and then you're just zooming right past it, right? Often this is going to come in layers, and you may be able to identify a pattern and then you're like, okay, I'm going to stop doing that, right? But what you'll see as you go down this road is these patterns, the more obvious patterns that you have, are often then reflected in many ways throughout many relationships. So, the example that I gave about, the narcissistic family dynamics, I had reflected that same cycle and pattern, not only with my romantic relationships, but in my career as well, my relationships with coworkers, it's in a lot of places. So I do want to remind you to be gentle with yourself during this process, because it is ugly and it is messy and it's difficult to look that critically at yourself as well as your interactions. Okay, but so as a part of this, of recognizing the patterns, I want to talk about attachment styles. Because genuinely, a lot of people don't even recognize or know that they don't have the awareness that they have any childhood trauma, right? And I know that sounds weird, but foundationally, our caregivers create the template for us of our attachment styles that we then reflect and repeat as adults. And there are 4 types of attachment styles: secure, avoidant, anxious, and disorganized. Now, secure attachment is essentially, that's our end game, okay? This is what we want. If you have a secure attachment style, you have the ability to regulate your emotions. You can easily trust other people. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody is deserving of trust, right? And it's not a criticism for giving your trust to people who didn't deserve it, right? Because that happens to everyone. But it's saying that you can trust in an environment of trust. Positive communication skills, being able to communicate your emotions, being able to communicate your needs, being able to communicate your boundaries. Okay, the ability to seek emotional support, right? Being able to be vulnerable enough with other people that you can go and say, hey, I'm really struggling right now. This is my problem. What do you think? You're comfortable being alone. You're comfortable being in close relationships. The ability to self-reflect in partnerships. And a part of that is being able to be open to feedback and criticism without, triggering that kind of defensive nature. Being able to connect, or being easy to connect with, so other people can come to you as well. The ability to manage conflict well. A lot of people struggle with this one, right? Because again, a lot of times when there is a conflict, we go back into that childhood nature of ours and just defend and protect or fight. And a lot of times these are the fight, flight, or freeze dynamics. And there's also fawn. Okay, high self-esteem, and this doesn't mean being a narcissist, okay? It means being able to be confident within yourself and your identity and your expression of your identity, and the ability to be emotionally available. It means that we don't shut down when others, show vulnerability towards us. Now, people with secure attachment styles have either gone through massive amounts of therapy, or they were lucky enough to have securely attached caregivers, right? So people who were able to teach them these traits, allowed them to express their emotions freely, that they had their needs met. But that's just not most people I know. Okay, so the next is avoidant attachment style, right? And so, if you're an avoidant, that means, anytime somebody comes to you with, vulnerability or asks for vulnerability from you, you tend to run away. You tend to, have more shallow, superficial relationships with people where you're not letting them go deep into who you are or how you actually feel, all that stuff. Because also you may not know. A lot of times avoidant attachment style, people don't understand their own emotions, which is why they can't share them, right? And so in that case, your caregivers may have left you to fend for yourself. Gen X, hello. Expected you to be independent. A lot of these people are hyper independent. Reprimanded you for depending on them, right? So basically you were met with a negative response when you went and sought comfort or validation from one of your caregivers. And they rejected when you did express your needs, or they were very slow to respond to your basic needs. Okay, so next is anxious attachment style. So these people tend to have fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, and they depend on a partner for validation and emotional regulation, right? So they expect other people to give them constant validation, and as well as, being responsible for their emotions. These tend to be your codependents, right? And I wanted to state too that, because I was essentially, avoidant attachment style for a really, really long time, right? Until I actually wanted to be in a relationship with someone, and then I was codependent. Yay. But basically, it's needing other people to give you kind of your sense of comfort, sense of identity, to tell you whether you're good or bad. Okay, and then there's disorganized, and there's combinations of all of these too, which I'm not going to go into. But disorganized is kind of like both. It's wildly unpredictable. Basically, there's this fear of rejection, but also wanting that attachment and validation from other people. They typically have a fear of rejection and an inability to regulate their own emotions, and often highly contradictory behaviors. They tend not to be able to trust anybody else. And so, a lot of this is that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? They accuse people of something, and then they behave in ways that reinforce that fear that they already had. And this gets tricky because a lot of these people then, can qualify as having personality disorders or mood disorders. They often also threaten self-harm or participate in self-harm, as well as have substance abuse disorders. Okay, but so understanding your attachment style will help you to identify some of these behavioral and relational patterns. And the real work is then, tracing that back to that childhood trauma and to those unmet needs, and being able to work through those again, so that you can get to that secure attachment style. Working on your self-confidence, doing things so that you don't have to seek validation and attention from external sources. Okay, so and the last thing I wanted to talk about is understanding projection. All unhealed people project. And what that means is that when you're in an unhealed state, you're going to project yourself, your intentions, your wants, your needs onto other people. And so we can kind of do this in one of two ways, right? The way that I did this is I kind of always projected other people's potential, right? I saw the best in everyone, and I couldn't see that other people had bad intentions. I assumed that everybody had the same kind of intentions as me. And that works the other way too. If people with bad intentions will often project those onto everybody else. So you need to be aware that not only do you do this, but other people do this. And so again, other people's opinions are none of my business, right? It's important that we first understand ourselves so that we stop doing this.